in. So I'm going to put in the A to Z database page, so that will give you the EBSCO link.
I already have it saved in my
Yeah, look at yeah.
bookmarks. Yeah, I use it.
Me too. But here you go if anybody needs to. Um, it looks like we've got a good amount of people now. So I'll go ahead and start and introduce myself if you don't know me. My name's Laura Lewis. I'm one of the librarians at the main campus of Panorama. I've been with BC since 2017. And so today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about the new EBSCO changes that were just implemented for us over this past summer. So if you haven't been on EBSCO in a while, you're going to see some differences. The idea is still the same, but there are enough differences and some new features that I think it's worthwhile for faculty to be aware of so that you can kind of share these with your students as well. Before I do that, though, before we get into EBSCO, I wanted to go over the A to Z database page because that has also changed and it's changed very recently. So let's see, right before winter break, the librarians were all meeting and we were kind of making some changes to the A to Z database page and kind of trying to make it a little bit more user friendly and intuitive for students. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. We'll go over the A to Z page real quick. Um, if you would like to follow along, like I said earlier, I would recommend that you click on EBSCO now and sign in. That way you don't get stuck as we're kind of going along, because you will have to sign in and do the two-factor authentication and things like that if you haven't done that yet. So let's see here. Okay, and then just in case, because I think some people came in after I put this in, I'm going to put in that link. It's in the chat box again. This is to the A to Z database page. You can find this from our library website under research, the research section. And so if you haven't been here in a bit, you're going to notice that there's some differences on the page. We've kind of streamlined the top a little bit, but what I really want to point out, these are some of the usability features that we've added for students. You'll notice that on some of the databases, you'll see these two little icons. One is the YouTube icon, and then the other one is a little page. If it has that YouTube icon, that means that we have a video on that database that students can click on to be taken right to it. And then that little paper is going to be a link to our LibGuide that we have. So we've had a new adjunct that started this past school year, and he's been working really hard on creating new LibGuides and instructional videos on our databases. So these are really helpful. They're really well done. I recommend taking a look at these. We have some ones on EBSCO, which I'll point out towards the end and give you direct links to those as well. But before we leave today, but I highly recommend taking a look at these. And as you scroll down, we now have when we're open, you'll see that the chat is available and students can chat directly from the A to Z page if they're having trouble. We also have some more helpful links here like that. So the idea here is that if students are feeling a little lost and overwhelmed with the A to Z database page, which is understandable because there's a lot of links going on, students have, a place that's easy to go where they can kind of try to get some help from here. Okay, so now that we're kind of all here, hopefully you have this open. I'm going to head back to my slides and we'll start the slides so that we can kind of start talking about EBSCO in general. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'm sorry. My computer keeps freezing on me. Let me know if I'm coming in and out, but like every time it just keeps stalling on me. So let me know if you can't hear me if I'm frozen on you. I'm gonna try to. All right, let me try this again. right, can you all do me a favor? Can you let me know in the chat box if you see my screen okay? Nothing's frozen for you? Okay, perfect. All right, let me know if I freeze. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. All right, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go over some of the major changes, kind of just a couple highlights, some of the good and the bad. If you have talked with a librarian recently about EBSCO, you've probably heard some things. We'll talk a little bit about that. There's one specific feature that I want to spend a good amount of time on, if possible, that I think you're going to find very helpful. And then we'll go over just a couple of little tips, how the library can help. And then I also added just a little bit about our new EBSCO database for nursing, CINAHL, and I'll briefly mention that towards the end. Okay, so some of the major changes that you're going to notice is it really has to do with the filters, and it also has to do with making the database more intuitive and accessible for students. So filters are going to be um, kind of in two different places. So they've made some filters more easily um, visible for students up at the top, and then some are going to require more clicks. They're also made it easier, like one of the main focuses for this new complete overhaul and change is making it easier for students to save and organize results. So we'll definitely talk about that in a little bit. And then the big one is referring to AI and doing a natural language search, which we'll talk about, and we'll talk about why why us librarians feel about it the way we do. And we'll kind of go over that in a little bit too. But let's talk about a little bit about the good and the bad, and then we'll actually get into the database. So some of the things that the librarians like is that it does form the student's point of view. It does make some things more intuitive and easier for students to see and kind of grasp on their own, to be able to kind of do certain filters. It does make it more accessible, like the screen reader is nicer. I'll show you that. Just way more features. They're really kind of more caught up with our Gale databases, if you've seen the two. So in some ways, it has gotten easier from the student's point of view. It's a little bit cleaner, easier, not as crowded in terms of on the screen. And then they do have a feature which about references and cited by that I'm going to get into in a little bit. Now, what you're going to notice when I'm demoing, and this is from a librarian or teacher's perspective, is that you're going to notice more clicks and more scrolling. Some things are easier and some things are going to require way more clicks for you as you're showing students. They've also kind of buried some of these features that are really cool, but they're really hard to find. So it's kind of a mix of the good and bad. They've also, for librarians, made it very, impossible for you to like share a link to a search that you've done, which is very frustrating for the librarians. Let's go ahead and actually get into the database so that you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to go back to A to Z. I'm going to scroll down. And what I thought we would start with is under our featured databases, we have the Academic Search Complete EBSCO pulled out. So go ahead and click on that database if you'd like to follow along. If you don't, no worries, you don't have to. If you haven't signed in at this point, you will have to sign in unless you're on campus. All right. So when we click directly on the Academic Search Complete, it takes us specifically to that database. But as you know, if you're familiar with EBSCO, we have more than one EBSCO database. And so if we clicked on just the EBSCO link under E, it would take us to searching all of our EBSCO databases. At any point in time, if you click the little searching and then it's a blue hyperlink with the name of the database, you can add and search multiple databases at once. So one of the new things is that it does make it a little bit easier for students to search all of the databases at once, and that it's not quite as slow as it used to be. It used to be very sluggish if a student would try to search all of them. Generally, we don't recommend doing that. We try to get students to kind of pick which databases are going to be most helpful for them for in terms of the class, in terms of the topic, that kind of thing. But Academic Search Complete is always a good database for most disciplines and topics that works. I'll go ahead for this demo. I'm going to click on our psychology database, which these are all alphabetical order now. And then you can hit select, and then now we're going to be searching two databases at once. All right, so let's talk about some of these filters that I've mentioned. If you scroll down, you'll see that they kind of have it broken up into tabs up here at the top that's different. And then you can kind of scroll down to kind of look at um, like it has the date range, which we're going to talk about. One of the new features is number of pages. That's one of the features that's buried, that's hard to find, but it's useful. But I'm going to do a practice search here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in social media, and then I'm going to put in anxiety in the second line. Most of the time when the librarians are demoing, we tend to kind of show students the search terms first, and then we tend to hit search and then show students how to use the filters. You can always, though, use the filters up at the top. Problem is that students tend to kind of get filter happy if they're doing that, and they'll put so many filters on that they won't come up with any results, and then they'll be frustrated. So usually it's, we try to say like, do one thing at a time. Don't like throw all of these different filters all at once. So once you get to the search, you'll notice what I mean about some filters are easier to see right away. But then if you have something a little bit more niche in terms of your filters, then you're going to have to do some more clicks. So right away, they've made it right up at the top. You can click on peer reviewed, and that automatically takes out all of our news, periodicals, magazines, that kind of thing. And then they've also made the date range different. And this is probably, to me, one of the more frustrating aspects of EBSCO, but it does make it easier if you give your students either the 5 year or the 10 year or the 1 year. It makes it very easy for students to kind of immediately click on what they're, one of these. However, if you are saying, well, I want you to look at the last 7 years in terms of, what you're finding, then it's going to take some more clicks. You're going to have to go to filters. Then the right side is going to come up. Then you'll have to go to publication date. Then you'll have to go to custom range. And then it's going to force you to use the date picker rather than the date bar or just putting in a year. You're going to have to put the month, the day in the year. So again, like I said, more clicks, more things to do. They also made it to where you can go by source type. So I'm going to click off peer reviewed here. And you can see, up at the top, that you can do by news, by magazine, trade publication, literature review. These were all before on the left-hand side that you can do, but now they've kind of put it up towards the top. One thing that I wanted to go back, so I'm going to go back to a new search here. And this is something that's a new feature, but they've buried it. So I'm going to do the social media again. Anxiety. We scroll down here. They do have it to where you can limit by the number of pages in the source. So we could put greater than 7 pages, and as we know, with scholarly peer-reviewed sources, they're usually 7+. So that can be a good one for students. Or if you want them to find some kind of empirical study and you want to make sure it's so many pages or things like that, that's a new feature that's brand new that they've just added. And the only place you can find it is here. It's not going to be on the right-hand side when you click all filters. So when you click on the all filters, you'll see it right here. Here's the active. And then if a student ever needs to kind of X out of this filter because maybe they've narrowed it too much, they can always click off the filters. You can also click here and we can look at the subjects just like it was before on the left-hand side. Now it's on the right-hand side and it'll pop up when they click all filters. Okay, so those are the major changes when it comes to filters. What I'd like to focus on now is looking at how students can organize their results and how they can save results and searches. So there's some new features there. Before I do that, though, are there any questions about the new way that filters are, um, the new interface in terms of filters? Okay, I'm going to go on to how you can teach students to organize and save results. But if anything comes up, please feel free to use the chat box. I'll try to monitor as I go. Okay, so in terms of some new features that EBSCO has that I wanted to point out, they do make it to where you can now save your projects, meaning you can save like entire searches that you can go back to. You can create different projects as you go, and then you can kind of also save results like you did before. Now, before you would have like a little icon like this. It was a little bit similar. It looked a little bit differently, and you can kind of save results as you go. And then when you were finished, you can go to kind of the folder. It's called Saved now. And then you can email yourself the entire folder or download all of the articles that are in the folder, that kind of thing. That's what we used to have. We still have that. However, now EBSCO has made it to where you can um, save projects and kind of go a little bit more in depth in terms of like what you're saving. However, in order to do some of these more advanced capabilities, EBSCO requires you to create a free account. So you do not have to have your students create a free EBSCO account, but if students want to use some of these features, it doesn't take a long time. It's just a couple minutes to create a username and a password. And that way, by using that, if students get timed out or log out of the database, if they have an account, when they come back in, it will have saved all of their searches, all of their results. Whereas if you do not create a free account and you save a result, as soon as the database times out, as soon as they click off of it, you're going to lose your progress. So in our orientations, a lot of times we did touch upon this with students and kind of tell them like, hey, make sure you keep that in mind. If you kind of leave the database and you don't make sure that you're saving your results, you're going to lose all of your progress on kind of where you're at. It didn't necessarily wasn't a big deal for students to do that, but if they want to use some of these more advanced capabilities that I'm going to show you, you really have to create that free account. So let me show you the projects that we can do. And so I've kind of already started a project here. So you can, let's say that you're doing two papers in your class. And so they're going to be doing two different research topics. You can kind of have them create a project for paper one and then like another project for paper two. And then students can click on that project and it will take them to any records that they've saved within that project or any searches that they've done. So for example, before here, I saved the social media and anxiety search. So then students can easily just click back into their search and then go back right to where they were at. So they don't have to worry about, okay, like what search terms did I use? Can I remember exactly what filters that I put on? Where was I? They can immediately just click on that to be taken to it. All right, let me show you how you can do that. So now that you know about that capability, I'm going to click on new search here. I'm going to do social media, but this time I'm going to do mental health. All right, so we're going to do peer reviewed, and then I'm going to do the past 5 years. Once I start getting into, I can start saving results like this, and those are going to be unsaved. And so when we go back to the saved, you should see those results now. If you would like to save all of them, you can add this search to the project by clicking this little file folder. You can either create a new project or do the one that you've already made. So I'll do EBSCO Flex Demo 2. You can even put in a due date, a description for the project, hit create. And then now when you click on that, you should see both projects that you can do. So necessarily, is this necessarily like really hugely important for your students? No, but it is really helpful and it is a nice feature. All of the EBSCO changes that we're going to go over and we've already gone over really kind of have to do with accessibility and just making it a little bit more user friendly on the students' end of things. So there are some different cool features on that. I'm gonna check the chat box, make sure. Okay, so it looks like we're good on that. So a lot of it is just going to be kind of right, a lot of it is just going to be students kind of exploring and seeing some of these features. In terms of what students are going to get out of our orientation to the librarians, we often don't have time to kind of go over too much in depth in terms of organizing results. We usually teach students how they can kind of save results or email the articles to themselves, that kind of thing, and then we kind of leave it there. However, especially if you're teaching some kind of lab as part of like maybe your English course or whatever, using the project feature might be really helpful for your students, especially if you're going to be, you have two different classes, two different class sessions where you're going to be having them do research, saving that project so they can kind of immediately jump back into where they were is going to be a really helpful new feature that students can use. Okay, I'm going to show you just a couple of other things that you'll notice, and then we'll get into what I think is probably the most helpful feature that you all are going to really like, and I think your students are going to find really helpful. Some of the other things that librarians are a little frustrated with is that you'll notice that when you want to kind of go back to your search terms and kind of update your search, which students are going to be doing all of the time, you have to again click advanced search up at the top in order to get back to where the search bars is so that you can adjust your terms. So for example, if students like, well, I've gotten, a million results and I need to narrow this down more, if they want to add their next search term, they're going to have to click on that advanced search to then be taken to the bar so that they can then add, let's say, anxiety into the search. Then they'll click search again. And then so now the filters should stay. Some of them don't, but usually the peer reviewed and the date limiter will stay on the search at least. And then you'll get your new results here. So that's one. The next thing is I want to talk about AI and the new EBSCO database and kind of how that works. So you're going to find that most of the databases are going to start playing with the use of AI and searching, and EBSCO has started doing it with their natural language search that they have. So if you notice this little thing right here that you can click on, what you can do is if you teach students to kind of click on this, students can start using either a thesis statement or some kind of question or sentence in their search. So actually, let me do this. I'm going to take this off. So let's say that your student puts in, does social media, pause. Okay. In the past, if a student did this into EBSCO or any of our databases, really, they would come up with 0 results. However, now if the natural language toggle is clicked on, it will now act more kind of like a Google or search engine search where it will give you results. That's a new feature, and it's one that librarians we really don't like very much. Yes, it can be a little bit easier for students. However, it's still not great in terms of how precise the search results are going to be. For a topic like this, it's not so bad. However, depending upon what the discipline is, what search terms they're putting in terms of their question or their thesis statement that they're typing out, it's really hit or miss. Some questions that I was putting in, if I put what are the effects of social media on mental health, nothing still comes up. So it's just going to depend upon what they type. The problem with you know, using this natural language and kind of teaching students to use that is that they're really not going to learn how exactly a database works by not teaching them how to use search terms and things like that. It's going to be a skill that's going to carry over. So it's not very precise. It can be even more confusing, especially if students are realizing that the results aren't on target, that are coming up. And it's just not quite there yet in terms of something that I would necessarily show students. So you'll find that the librarians are not really advertising this feature very much. I did want to show it to you all just so that you know it's one of the new features on EBSCO, especially if you're playing around, you come across this yourself and you say, oh, what do they mean by natural language? It also has a link so you can kind of click on it and talks about this is AI. And so this is so where that you can put in an entire sentence or an entire question into your search. Just know it's still very imprecise and it doesn't yield a lot of good results a lot of the times. It just depends. But that is a feature, and that is a feature that we can have it as the default, but the library has decided not to. And we'll kind of see how EBSCO kind of keeps making this better and better because I think it's something that they're going to be continually working on. Pretty much all the databases are going to be. Okay, I know that was a lot. I know I'm throwing a lot at you. Are there any questions or comments? Uh, Feel free to use the chat box or if you would like to speak on mic. I'm gonna go. Sorry, it froze on me again.
I do have a quick question, Laura, although I don't want to disrupt you getting your stuff back up. Um, when I am working with students who say, "Oh, I've never used a database," I'll kind of walk them through some similar places. I have not often started with the Research Wizard or OneSearch, but that's probably just my own biased background with those being relatively newer. Uh, how would you rank the wizard and OneSearch and some of that stuff that has been there in comparison to just doing the A to Z databases in terms of a starting place when you're introducing students?
That's a really good question. Um, and no worries. I got my computer to unfreeze, so it's good. So I'll share my screen in just a second, but let me answer that question. It's really going where I have students start is really going to depend upon the class, the topic, and what they're kind of focusing on. So OneSearch, if anyone isn't familiar with OneSearch, it's our catalog that we have, but it also searches almost all of our databases at once. There are some news databases that OneSearch does not use. And so technically students can start using OneSearch and they can kind of do just one big search and it's going to pull from all of the different databases or most of them at one time. In terms of where do I want students to start, a lot of times I do not have
cleaning is
them.
one of those chores you put off because it's annoying, time consuming, or just flat out gross. This is one of those products that makes it easier. The Star Drops Pink Stuff Miracle Power Foaming Toilet Cleaner turns from powder into a self-activating pink foam the second it touches the water. You literally sprinkle it in, watch it bubble up, let it sit, then flush. That's it. No harsh chemical smell, no intense scrubbing, no fighting stains for 10 minutes. This formula was made to tackle the real mess: limescale, buildup, grime, and water ring.
Right, I have no idea what that was. Okay, so sorry about that. So in terms of where to start, I would only have students start with immediately with OneSearch if they needed to look for books, because a lot of times starting with books can be really helpful. In terms of searching all of our databases at once, though, I almost never have students start with OneSearch for articles, just because it's so overwhelming. So unless it's something niche, so for example, there's an assignment where in a psychology class, students have to pick a different type of philia, so like necrophilia and things like that. If it's something really niche like that, they can start with OneSearch. But usually going into the individual databases is going to be less overwhelming for students. If they put in social media and anxiety in OneSearch and looked for everything in terms of articles and books and news articles and all kinds of things, they're going to come up with like hundreds of thousands, if not like a million results that are going to come up on that. So it depends. Most of the time, no, I do not necessarily recommend OneSearch as the starting point, especially for articles. Now, Research Wizard is a little bit different. Let me explain what that is, and let me share my screen because I want to make sure I show everybody what Research Wizard is. So hopefully my computer doesn't freeze on me again. Okay, so we do kind of have it pretty prominent on our A to Z database page now. So Research Wizard here is going to be a way for students to kind of go through this. It's kind of like gamified a little bit to figure out where they should start in terms of their research. So it kind of asks students questions and then it kind of guides them into, based on their answers, where they can start doing their searching. So it starts with like, what kind of source are you looking for? So if students say scholarly sources, then it'll ask like, what type of scholarly source are you looking for? Books or peer-reviewed journal articles? And then students can then click on peer-reviewed articles. What kind of subject? Let's say it's arts or communications. And then, what discipline is it? Well, it's a communications class. So let me click on this, or English. And then it kind of goes, more specifics talking about, do you need to focus on literary criticism? Are you doing a topic for a speech? Let's say it's communications class. And it kind of keeps going and then until they're done, and then it will say, okay, here's the database that we recommend that you start with. So it depends on the answers. Here's the thing, the Research Wizard can be really helpful, especially if students are kind of playing around and they don't know where to start. It's asking questions, though, that a lot of times I'm not sure how students are going to be able to readily answer those. Students a lot of times don't know what a peer-reviewed article is, or students don't really quite understand what discipline it is that they're looking at, especially if it's for something like an English course or a communications course where their topic can really, vary depending on what that umbrella topic is. So it can be a great place to start, but it's not something that we necessarily use in our orientations. It's just a feature that students can kind of play around with, if that makes sense. Neil, did that kind of answer your question? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it makes me, like you said, just another tool, especially for students who have the time and energy to play around a little bit, which not always they do, but it's good to have things to explore with.
Yeah. And this is something like the research wizard is something that Ariel Dyer, our librarian Ariel Dyer, and she's kind of continually tinkering with it and trying to make it better. Um, and so it's kind of it's a feature that's there, but we don't necessarily talk about it a lot in our orientations type of thing, but it is there for students. Um, so that is there kind of at the top. And like I said, also that the fact that Research Wizard is up at the top, that's a new change too that we made at the end of last semester. We're trying to make it to where students can readily find these tools that can help. Okay, so let's go back to my slides, and I'm going to talk about specifically one feature that we can get into. So if you've ever had your students use Google Scholar to do their research on, you may have noticed and kind of guided students towards um, looking at the cited by and the references when they find one article that they found that fits for them. And so this is kind of a something that librarians call pearl growing. So if students find one article or one source that is really helpful and right on target for them, they can use that one article to then find more that are similar. And Google Scholar has made that pretty easy for a long time. They've had those features. Well, EBSCO has now added it into their new update, and they've made it very easy for students to go through the references of an article to see if EBSCO has those references. And they've made it to where if there are other articles within EBSCO that have cited this article, that students can also easily find those as well. So it's a really powerful tool, especially if you have a student who has a topic that they're struggling finding scholarly sources on. This is a really good way for them to find similar articles. So let me show you how that works. So I'm going to use that same search again, social media, and I'm going to put in anxiety. I'm going to hit search. Okay. First, I'll point out the cited by. So you'll notice that some of the articles, as we're going through the results, have this little rectangle that says cited by, and then it has one. Let's see another one. Cited by one. This one says cited by 7. What it's telling you is that there are 7 articles within this database that are citing um, this particular article. So let's say that your student says, oh, this is exactly the article that works really well for my topic. I want to find others. They can click on this cited by, and it's going to take them to and show you, okay, well, these 7 articles cited that article. So ideally, what you're looking for is you're trying to find similar articles. And so they can kind of go through these results, and ideally, they'll find an article that's similar that they can also use as a source on their paper. You'll notice that not all of them have that though. So it depends on what's in the database or not. The other thing that you can look at is what articles this article is including in their reference list or bibliography. So if you click on the article title, it will take you to the record page. If you click on references, which is right next to the details, it then gives you a list of all of the different sources that this particular article is referencing at the end in their bibliography. And if we have it in this database, the students can then click on this article and find it. If it's not hyperlinked, what that means is we don't have it in our EBSCO database. So this is a really quick and easy way that students can use one article they found to find others that are similar. And hopefully, especially if they're kind of having a topic they're struggling with, this can really give them ideas. Now, in terms of this feature, I've had basically the fall semester to kind of teach some of these new features, and students really have, really enjoyed this feature, and it's been really helpful for them. And they've really found that they have found other relevant articles by using this. It's very much, it very much depends upon the discipline, upon the topics and how niche the article is. It depends on how many results we're going to have in our EBSCO database. So you may find that when students click on the article and they look at the references, maybe there's only one or two that they can click on. It's just going to depend. It's like this one, you have to scroll down a little bit to find one that's hyperlinked. But it can be a really, really great tool to use. Probably my favorite feature now of EBSCO that I really like. And it can be also a really good way for you to teach in terms of kind of adding to the scholarly community. How important is this particular study? Is this been cited by a lot of different works? How big of a study is this kind of thing? And you can kind of show how scholarly articles are kind of part of a scholarly conversation type of thing. It's a really good way to show that to students. So, okay. So this is a new feature. Okay. So I wanted to talk about how the library can help, and then I'll show you our new nursing database in case anyone's interested, and then we can go for questions. So we're going to finish this up real quick. So how the library can help. Just out of curiosity, in the chat box, can you let me know if you do orientations, if you've ever done orientations or workshops in the past? So Gloria, I definitely know you do orientations. I just did yours last semester. But I'm curious to see who here has used an orientation before. Okay, so we've got a no so far. Oh, Neil, I'm so sorry. I just noticed that your EBSCO is freezing too. Okay, it's not just me. It's been going really slow today. Oh yeah, Gloria, I know. I got the email invite today. Awesome. Okay, so Claire would like to have would like to maybe consider having an orientation. So some of you have, some of you haven't. So a lot of the things that I talked about today are things that we can kind of go over in an orientation. So if you're unfamiliar with an orientation, what we do is I'm going to give you a request form, and you can fill that out. Our library department chair gets it, and then she assigns it to one of the librarians. And basically what it is we can kind of tailor a lesson for your students specifically to what they're going to need to know for their assignment. You either bring them into the library, we have our 217 computer lab, or we can go out to your classroom and do it that way. Or if it's an asynchronous class, we can create a module or a LibGuide, but all different ways that we can kind of help your students. And we tailor our lesson to exactly what your students need. So let me put in the orientation request form here. Okay, so I'm putting that in the chat box. And so by filling this form out, it's going to ask you like what dates would you like to have the orientation. It'll ask for 2 just in case the first one doesn't work for us. It'll ask you for some information about what your students need to know in order to do their assignment. It'll give you a place for you to upload if you have your assignment. That really helps us. And then once it gets assigned, then the librarian is going to reach out to you and they'll ask like, hey, I'm assigned your orientation. Can you tell me a little bit more? Here's an outline that I suggest, and then we can kind of work with you to tailor our lesson to what your students are going to need. And excuse me, and then like I said, we can either go to your classroom or you can come to the library, or depending on what other modality you have. And this is going to be true for all of the different campuses. So Delano, Arvin, now Southwest, we have librarians at all of these campuses, and they can all do orientations there. The other thing that you can use for your students, if you cannot swing an orientation, let's say you don't have, let me put this closer here. Let's say you don't have a room in your schedule in order to kind of to schedule one. You can have your students do our workshops. So our workshops are going to be kind of canned lessons, and each of the librarians has 1 to 2 workshops that we teach, and they don't change. So for example, I teach evaluating news sources, and I teach another workshop called Sources 101 that kind of goes into what a scholarly source is and the different types of sources. And students can kind of sign up for these workshops. We have them spread out through the semester. They're an hour in length and they're over Zoom. And then we have students do a quiz. So students can kind of put in their name and then whatever professor has sent them. So if you're getting extra credit or if it's a part of your research paper assignment or whatever, we'll then email you and say, hey, these are the students that attended the workshop. And so that way your students can kind of get some kind of instruction if you can't do an orientation. So we have ones on how to find scholarly articles, how to evaluate sources. We have all different ones. There's one on plagiarism kind of thing. So that's another way for your students to kind of get some knowledge on some of these things. Our finding articles and our research strategies tend to be the most popular workshops that we have, especially the finding scholarly articles will really go into EBSCO, into that deep dive if you want students to kind of learn a little bit of what we've talked about here in that workshop. The other way we can do it is we can show you LibGuides as well. So we create guides specifically for different classes and for different databases and things like that. So let me go to LibGuides. So for example, we have a subject guide pretty much on every subject. And then from there, we'll do specific guides for classes. So for example, let me show. This is one that we worked on recently. Professor Egan has his assignment on privacy issues. So we do a whole guide where we put in links to different books, to different databases that are helpful. They're going to be helpful for students to use in their assignment. And so the guide, just like the lesson, is tailored to what your students need. So this can be a guide that's specifically on your assignment, but we also have guides for our databases. So I'm going to put in this guide. So this is our new guide that we just kind of came out with that kind of covers all of the new EBSCO features that we talked about today. So you'll also see that Chris created a video and then he has timestamps too, so students can go to exactly what part of the video they need. And so it covers some of the features that we talked about today. Not every feature we talked about today is going to be in the video, but a lot of the important stuff is going to be there for students. And then, oh, I'll give you one more link. That way you have for the workshops too. So students do need to enroll in the workshops. You have to register online for them. And so here's that link, and you can find out also here what workshops we have. So there's lots of places for you to go to kind of get information, and there's also a lot of places that you can provide these links for your students too, to kind of get this information. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I want to end to make sure that there's any questions or anything that anybody would like to go over, even if it's not necessarily about EBSCO, if you have any other database questions or anything. I'd be happy to talk about it. Oh, you're welcome, Gloria. It's nice to see you 2 days in a row now. Mm, Sometimes I talk too fast. I want to make sure I'm giving everybody the chance to type if they're typing in a question here. Oh, thank you guys. Happy to help. If you're interested in another library workshop, I'm teaching one on narrowing, um, how to use AI to teach students to narrow their topics. And that'll be tomorrow at 3 p.m. if anyone's interested. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. You'll be getting an email soon to do a like a survey or whatever at the end of the workshop. So they'll be sending that out to you.
I have a question outside of this. Um,
Yeah, sure.
yeah, so you're going to be doing my first orientation in a couple of weeks, and then today Faith said they've scheduled my. Are you doing both?
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad. That'll be great.
Yeah, I'm excited
And since
for sure.
yesterday my enrollment has gone from 15 to 17, so it's looking like the class will make, but I'll definitely let you know by the end of the week if there's a problem.
Oh yeah, of course. And no worries if it does. That's happened before. So I mean,
Yeah. Apparently, 420 is not a popular time. It's the first time I've ever taught it.
okay, I can imagine that. Yeah, students are like a little bit over the day at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. My own class, my library B1 was actually I bummed we didn't get enough enrollment, so I had to cancel it. It's a
Oh,
bummer.
yeah. Yeah, I've had that happen. So tomorrow it's your workshop is unlocking focus research, teaching students narrow topics with AI.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm already enrolled in that. I get to see you three
Hey,
days
hey,
in a row.
I know. And then we'll have the two orientations too. So you'll be seeing a
Yeah.
lot of me this semester.
And by tomorrow, I may even have washed my hair.
All right. Well, I'll see you tomorrow, and then I'll be in touch soon once the semester starts about your orientations.
Okay, great. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.
All right. Bye.